I'm so glad I was evicted. On the illusion of permanence, pot-bound roots, and learning to operate on land time. The best solutions often come at the worst cost. When I first hooked up with my ex-husband, the Turk, he lived in the bottom floor of a grand house with a Japanese soaking tub, an old cedar sauna, and sweeping gardens in the middle of horse country in Tryon, North Carolina. Off a main road of legacy farms and rolling fields of Irish green grasses, you reached his house by navigating a meticulously maintained dirt road flanked by more farms and crystal clean mountain streams. From the dirt road, a huge iron gate marked the long driveway, passing over 2 bridges to the house. Before I met my ex, I had dreamed about that driveway in such detail that the first time I traveled it in person, I stopped my car, got out, looked around me, and gaped in disbelief. I had been there before. In the dream, a shadowy figure pointed to a smooth rock on the ground that was etched with the word Morpheus. I wouldn't have been able to tell you offhand that Morpheus was the Greek god of dreams. When I woke, I had to look it up. In the driveway, the first time I visited the house, I expected to find the rock. So great was the familiar detail. I scuffed my boot on the ground and peered beneath the grass. I don't think I would have ended up marrying the Turk if it hadn't been for that house. In retrospect, I see how my dream warned me of the illusion. The house was tall and upright, 3 stories constructed around 3 huge fireplaces, their mantels salvaged from various antebellum houses. In the evenings, we opened a wall of glass doors in the lower floor and dined al fresco on the terrace. In the distance, the Blue Ridge Mountains faded to indigo in the twilight. Old trees kept watch, and one night, fueled by raka and feta, I thought I was seeing spirits as fireflies glowed along the old wooden beams in the ceiling of the bedroom. Half the kitchen glowed in natural light from the glass ceilings and walls of a repurposed atrium, the panes lifted by cranks and old chains, the edges an herb garden of planters, an indoor garden waiting for scissors and a simmering pot. We lived in that house a month before the owner decided to sell. Her decision launched the farm that eventually became the longest relationship of my life. It's still going. Leaving that house in Tryon, I was inconsolable. "Stop crying," the Turk said. "This house was never meant to last." I was already running Bramblewood Stables as its own creature before I met the Turk. But his arrival changed the dynamic of the other tenant at the farm I leased and the dynamic of the program I ran. The Turk is the sort of person who fills rooms. He doesn't leave much space for bystanders. The owner of the farm gave my name to the owner of another farm, part to get me out of his hair and part to offer me room to grow. Soon we moved to yet another old barn near the city, where I planted my roots and stayed for 2 decades. Except they weren't really my roots. Like a garden bed filled with mint, my shoots overlapped with the Turk's broad trunks and the shared history of other trainers who had come before us in that space, on that land. I functioned as a humble apologist, giving homage to all that had come before me and deference to the Turk, because his presence gave me time to be able to do what I'd quit all my real jobs to open a farm to do in the first place: stay home and write. I'd stopped calling myself a horse trainer. This was foreshadowing, but a subconscious knowing, a hint of things to come. In time, the Turk moved on because to him, relationships were houses that were never meant to last. And I was left with his footprint captured in the cement of my life and business. Time and water couldn't smooth the bump. I remained in service of the landlord, who I appeased and coddled, and I limped through every hoop to keep him happy. He could pull the plug at any time. I have love affairs with farms, and like most of the people I've chosen, current and final husband excluded, those relationships have seldom been healthy. They've all been a lesson or a teaching moment, but rarely nurturing and reciprocal. I also harvest stories, tilling the substrate until the roots are freed and the story can flourish. When the stories fruit, I pass them on. The only metaphors I'm interested in these days are about planting. If you spend your life harvesting stories, you find yourself frequently in pickles because you're drawn to mysteries and intensities. In relationship with people and with places, mysteries and intensities make for great stories, but rarely a peaceful life. In time, the Turk left, my uncle died, the landlord died, his family took over the farm, and I moved into the farmhouse. Suddenly, I could walk down the hill and check on the horses any time of the day or night, which in many ways was better than my failed marriage. But I couldn't escape the imprint of the people who had passed through the farm. I was on borrowed time and borrowed land, in an industry borrowed from the teachers who had come before me. Guilt by association. If you spend your life harvesting stories, the universe eventually hands you a climax. And mine happened 20 years later when I learned that the land I'd rooted into was being developed. And I had 6 months to find a new farm, a new home, and a new way of interpreting my old stories. For 2 decades, I had grown my business through and despite of the fear of what would happen if I was ever forced to leave the farm I knew as home. All things eventually come to an end, but I operate on land time, a geographic clock. Human time often shocks me. Learning that I was evicted forced my hand to consider new ways of doing everything. With nothing else left to do, I put one foot in front of the other and just powered through my fear. Lavender Hill, the place where we landed, was on the market, and so many people kept sending me the link to the listing, always with the caveat that it was perfect but located beside a prison. It was also well out of our price range. And it was the perfect spot to make a new life on top of the life I had built with the horses, but it seemed impossible. The price was too high. The details of moving an entire farm seemed too much. I had no idea how we could make it work. It felt like I was walking into a dream, but one that didn't come with a warning. I figured it couldn't hurt to try, and I had nothing more to lose. So a friend tracked down the owner of Lavender Hill and sent me her Facebook profile. I messaged her and gave her the backstory of our farm and why we were so desperate for a new permanent home to secure and continue to grow. We agreed to meet a few days later so she could give me the full tour of the farm. I sincerely felt like I was wasting her time. Fundraising was going well, but our timeline was limited, and the price of the farm was beyond what I felt comfortable spending. Christopher took the day off work, and we pulled into the circular driveway of the farmhouse as evening approached. Admittedly, I was not impressed. I'm a fan of the Gothic South, and I'm a product of the darkest legacies of this region. The farmhouse looked like Gone with the Wind, with its white columns and narrow, paved porch. The interior told a different story. It smelled like the binding of an old book. In my desperation to find a new farm, I overlooked the fact that the house was 200 years old. This house was nearly as old as the country. I don't remember details of my first impressions of the interior. Inside the house, my body didn't ache with a sense of yearning or fate. We walked down to the barn, and I thought how nice it would be to base our operations in a structure that didn't leak. A place where the rafters weren't sagging and the stalls were level. We followed the owner to the fields and were met by 2 juvenile armadillos that greeted us like puppies. We had to shoo them away. I'd never seen an armadillo up close before, and neither had the owner of the property. Like us, the creatures were newcomers to the land. I'm mesmerized by the cone-shaped indentations their noses make in the dirt. I was still unimpressed. My gaze scanned the fences that needed to be repaired and the broad, expansive riding ring. Farther down in the fields, we navigated a hill that rimmed a creek. A meadow, ringed with trees, was the first note in my love song to this place. The grass was dense, overgrown, and so green. I wanted to lie down in it or sink onto my knees to pray for a way to make this place happen for us. The same thing happened later as we walked to the pond and to the field that curls around it. The sun was low in the sky, and it reflected through the trees, catching the surface of the water. I broke apart from the others and walked the length of an oak grove, marveling at the thick branches above me and whispering a prayer of possibility. The house is interesting and filled with history, but it was the land that got me. I guess I'm still learning how to live in a house that supports me and that, if all goes well, I may not have to leave. Somehow, we made it work. I still pinch myself because in so many ways, coming here was an effort of making the impossible possible. The house in Tryon with the Turk had been an inherited stage set filled with the dreams that happened in our 20s. It was grand and cinematic and entirely hollow. I had dreamed it into existence before I ever saw it, falling in love with a mirage of iron gates and an indigo horizon. In retrospect, that dream had been a warning of the illusion, a premonition of a place where I would have to shrink, apologize, and live on borrowed time. But Lavender Hill doesn't require warning because it doesn't ask me to give up pieces of myself to exist here. If the Turk's house was an illusion of safety, Lavender Hill is the reality of sanctuary. When we closed on the new farm and walked across the steep threshold of the front door, it didn't feel like entering someone else's story or bowing to a landlord's whims. The energy here isn't haunted by the heavy footprints of trainers who came before me, nor is it tangled in the broad trunks of someone else's ego. It feels old and wise and clean. For 20 years, I thought I was protecting my roots by staying still on borrowed land. I didn't realize I was just keeping myself pot-bound. This new farm isn't an intoxicating, toxic love affair born out of intensities and mysteries. It is a quiet, reciprocal exhale. All the land asks of me is partnership. Same with my husband. I am no longer a humble apologist occupying a corner of someone else's kingdom. I am finally at home. All in all, the Turk was right about one thing. No house is meant to last. Land time moves differently than human time. To a mountain or a pasture, a 20-year tenancy is just a blink, a single season in a vast geologic clock. We are all on borrowed time, and we are all just passing through. Every landlord, every trainer, every husband, and every rider is eventually evicted by time itself. But there is a profound difference between passing through a place as an apologist, hiding in the shadows of someone else's history, and passing through as a partner to the soil. I used to think my roots had to be locked in concrete to be real. Now I know that true roots are carried inside us. The eviction didn't destroy the life I built, but it forced me to transplant into richer earth. Lavender Hill will eventually belong to someone else, too. The stories I harvest here will one day be old tales told by the next person who hoists themselves over the tall front threshold. But for now, we have a home. The horses are safe, and the soil is mine to see to. The best solutions often come at the worst cost. I had to lose my illusion of permanence to finally find peace. And for that, I'm so glad that I was evicted. Love, Kim.